Hi guys, it's Professor Palumbo here. I want to talk to you today about Chapter 10, using databases in our Visual Basic applications. Up until now, we've been pretty much creating applications where we enter data into a form and just manipulate that data. But in the real world, most of the time we're going to be accessing databases, updating databases, deleting records, adding records, modifying records in a database. So Chapter 10 is a really important chapter. It's going to be unusual because you're not going to be doing a lot of coding. In fact, all the code that you need to do is generated automatically for you, so you're going to love it. Your projects are going to be super fast and super easy in Chapter 10 because you don't have to do any coding. However, there are some concepts in Chapter 10 that are important to understand. So I wanted to just touch base with you, make sure you understand how to connect to the database and some of the concepts that are involved. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So I'm going to click File, New Project, and I'm just going to leave everything generic for now just because I'm going to discard this. But anyway, we come into our form. Now for the first little project that they do in the book, they're using what's called a data grid, which is basically just a grid of all the data that's in the table that we're going to be viewing. So if you come into your toolbox toolbar and there's a section called data. So let's find our data section. Here it is right here. And in that data section, there's an object in there called the data grid view. And you're going to click on that and drag and drop it into your form, and it creates a little square in there and it opens up this little smart tag. And in this smart tag, we have a little drop down arrow that says choose data source. And this is how we tell it where the data is coming from. So I'm going to click the drop down arrow and I'm going to click add project data source. And I'm going to go ahead and say that it's a database and hit next. Then I'm going to go ahead and say it's a data set. And then okay, so we have to tell it where our database is. So I'm going to click New Connection. And make sure that you're accessing the Access database, not the SQL Server. I mean, you can use either one, but I was experiencing some issues with the interface to the SQL Server, so I'm just going to go with Access, and I think you guys should do the same. Now, if it doesn't say Access there, just click Change, and then select Microsoft Access Database File. Then click OK. Notice that you can use any kind of database file. If you had an Oracle database or some other type of database, you could select whatever. It doesn't, Visual Basic doesn't care because it actually stores the data as XML tags. So it converts the data from any kind of database, so you can really use anything. All right, now for the database file name, I'm going to click Browse, and you have to go to the folder where your database, your data is. So actually, I unplugged my jump drive, so I've got to go find it. So let me get in here, access database files. All right, here we go. Where are we? Where is my data? All right, hopefully it's in here. No? Okay, let me pause this. Okay, so sorry about that. I was hunting around for my file. Anyway, so we have to go to browse and we have to look. I'm going to go to my C drive. I'm going to go to my student data folder. And in there we have database files access version and SQL version. We're using the access version. And I'm selecting R&R books. And that's my database. I'm going to click open. And now I've got my database that I'm going to be using. I click OK. It's now got my database and the location. I can hit next. It asks me, do you want to use a local data file that is not in the current project? Or I'm sorry, would you like to copy that file into your project? Yes, we always want to do that. That way you'll see that in Solution Explorer, there's your rnrbooks.mdb. And that way when I open up your projects and look at them, the copy of the database is there. I don't have to add it. So always say yes to that. Make a copy of the database as part of your project, and that will be a lot easier going forward. Okay, so then I'm going to hit next. And now we come to a screen that asks us to choose what objects we're going to be using. If you take a database class, you'll learn more about what a view is. It's just another way of looking at a table. But we're going to be dealing with tables in here. And when we expand the triangle next to tables, we'll see that there's two tables in this database. There's a books table and there's a subject table. You could actually, outside of Visual Basic, you could open up this database in Access because it's an Access database, and you could look at it and see, the tables and see the data and all of that and become familiar with the data that you're working with. Um, Now, in the Chapter 10 hands-on, you guys are going to be expanding the books and just picking the fields that you need. I think it's ISBN and author and something else. But for this exercise, we're going to grab the entire book's table. So we're just going to put a check mark for the whole table. We're not going to select individual fields, and then we're going to hit finish. And that makes that connection for us. And that connection basically creates a grid that we have to expand, and we have to sometimes, adjust the size of our form so that we make our form wide enough so that we can show all of the fields that we want to display in our grid. And there we go. There's our grid. Now, if I hit the start button right now and run this, you can see that I didn't have to write any code. And what happens is we have a grid full of the data from this Access database table. Boom, we didn't even have to do anything. All we had to do was make the connection. Now, if you do want to look at the code behind the scenes, I can double click on the blue title bar and go back into the code, and you will see that there is one line of code that got created. It's in the form load event. It automatically generated this for you. And basically what it's doing is it's saying, okay, I have a data set for the books table, and I want to fill it with data using my table adapter. And we're going to talk about what these things are in a moment. But that code got generated for you. And you might have also noticed that when you added the grid and made the connection, there were some objects that popped up down in the bottom in your component tray. So this R&R Books data set is the set of data that we brought into this project that we're going to be viewing in our grid. So it creates a local data set. And you can see that data set is listed over here in your Solution Explorer. Sometimes when we select our data, we're not necessarily going to grab an entire table. We might be asking for specific fields. We might be asking for specific records for only people that, have nonfiction, or only for fiction, or things like that. So our data set isn't necessarily always going to be composed of everything that's in the table. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but the table adapter is what defines what records and what fields we ask for. The book's binding source is what creates the connection between our Visual Basic form and the database table. So the binding source, you could say, is a way of binding an object in our Visual Basic form to a database table that's located somewhere. So that's what binds those two things together. And as I said, the table adapter is what tells us what data and what fields we want. And we're going to take a look at that table adapter in a moment. But that's it for creating the grid. I'm going to move to the next project, which creates a little bit different. Let me go ahead and just close this solution. I'm going to discard it. And I'm just going to create another new project and just use the defaults because I don't want to waste time. Okay, and so I'm just going to expand my form a little bit. Now I'm going to create my connection a little bit differently. I'm not going to drag and drop the grid view from over here. I'm not going to drag and drop text boxes. There's a way that I can make my connection to my table and then bring all of that data in, but have, have it show it one record at a time instead of in a grid where we're viewing all the records at once. So let's take a look at how we can do that. Now we need to open up a window called the data window. So we're going to click View, Other Windows. There it is, data sources, actually not data, data sources. So I'm going to click View Other Windows and then Data Sources. This opens up my data sources window. And what this data source window allows me to do is to add a data source just like we did before using the Smart tag in our grid. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add New Data Source. It brings up the same wizard, the data source configuration wizard that we saw before. We can go ahead and hit Next. We have database. We're going to create a data set. The connection we have to create. So make sure you have Access as your database type. Then click Browse and locate your database, rnrbooks.mdb. Then we can click OK, hit Next. Yes, we want to locally store the data set or the database. Save this connection, go ahead and hit Next. Now here again, we need to select our table. I'm going to select the entire books table, but as I mentioned in Chapter 10 Hands-On, you're going to expand this and select just certain fields. Go ahead and hit Finish. All right, we now have our data source and it's located over here in our data sources window. I'm going to click the triangle to the left of our books table and expand it open, and you can see all the fields are in there. Now, if I wanted to drag and drop individual fields, I could. I could just say, okay, I want the title, okay, I want the subject code, and I could drag and drop those in there. But I'm just going to hit undo because I don't want to do it that way. What I'm going to do is I want all of these fields. So I'm just going to close that list back up again. And you'll see there's a drop down arrow here on the books table. I can either drag and drop this as a grid like we saw before, or as detail view. I'm going to click detail view, drag and drop my table in. But instead of getting a grid, now I'm getting the detail view. And the detail view is a form where you're viewing each field in an individual text box, one record at a time. So now I could go ahead and hit start. Some code got generated automatically for me. I'm seeing my data, and it even gives me a little toolbar that I can use to move to my next record and move through the records individually like that. The only problem with using this toolbar is that, if I'm looking for a specific ISBN number, I have to keep hitting the arrow and go all the way through sequentially through all the records to find the one that I'm looking for. So we're going to make a few modifications to this project, and we're going to make it a little bit easier to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this toolbar. I don't want this toolbar up there. This is called the books table, or the books binding navigator. There it is, the books binding navigator. So all you have to do is go to your component tray, click once on it, and just hit the delete button, and that's going to delete that toolbar across the top, so we don't need that. What we're going to do instead is we're going to create a combo box out of our ISBN field, so we can drop down the list and go directly to the ISBN number that we want. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to delete this label, and I'm going to drag my ISBN number back in. Now remember, we can expand the list and select a specific field. Now for the ISBN field, by default, it brought it in as a text box, but if I select it, I can select a different type of control. I'm going to select combo box, and I'm going to drag it back in again. And now I have my ISBN number as a combo box. I'm just going to line my, whoopsie, didn't mean to do that. Just going to line that back up over there. And just line this guy up a little bit, make sure everything looks good. And again, you can play around with these if you want to make that longer, you want to make that shorter, or whatever, you can. Now the thing is, if we run it right now, which a lot of students do, and they say, oh, I'm all good, I got my combo box and everything looks good, but watch what happens if I click my drop down arrow. I don't see any other records other than this record, and I don't have any way of moving to record number 2 or record number 3. So this is not going to work. Now, what you have to do is you have to add some things to your combo box. So we have to come back to our combo box and click the little smart tag. And we have to tell it we want to bind our combo box to the table because we want to be able to see all the ISBN numbers, not just the one for this record. So we have to click this little checkbox that says use data bound items. And what we're going to do is tell it where our data source is coming from. When we click the drop down arrow, we see our book's binding source. We're going to click that. Okay, that's the name of our binding source that tells us how we're connecting our Visual Basic controls to a table. We're using that binding source. Then we have to tell it what we want to display in this box. We want to display the ISBN number, so we're selecting that. Now we're not going to be modifying any values or anything, so we don't need that value member, but we do need to say selected value, because when we click on that ISBN number, we want it to bind us to that whole table and show us the whole list. So what we're doing for selected value is we're clicking the drop down, expand your book's binding source if you have to, and select ISBN number. Once we've filled those 3 items in, now if we rerun our project again, we should have now a whole list of ISBN numbers that we can choose from, and we click and it takes us to that book. So that's what you want. Make sure you test this out. Make sure that when you select an ISBN number, it's taking you to a book that corresponds to that number. Now, the only other thing I want to talk about is what if I want to sort my drop-down list? What if this is not in sequential order and I want to sort it. What you guys are going to be doing in Chapter 10 Hands-On is you're going to be using a combo box for the title. And you're going to want to sort the title in alphabetical order so that you can find the title you're looking for and not have to look through every single title. You want it to be in some sort of order. So in order to sort, I'm just going to close. For some reason, my close button is not working. I have to hit my stop button to stop the execution of my project. But once we come back in here, what I want to show you now is if you come over to Solution Explorer, you see that there's this XSD file over here. This is your schema. And if you double click the XSD schema, you'll see what looks like kind of like a little table layout in Access if you've ever used Access. And you can see all of your fields listed here. And then down at the bottom, you see something called the Books Table Adapter. And the table adapter is an SQL statement. So those of you that have done anything with database, if you've taken database, or maybe you've taken my Oracle database SQL class, you'll know what SQL is, but SQL is a database language that allows us to manipulate our databases. So what I'm going to need you guys to do is right click on your table adapter and click Configure. This takes us into our table adapter, and basically what the table adapter is it's SQL. And so we can see our SQL statement that tells us I want to select these fields from this table, but now we want to add some sorting. Now, if you know SQL, you could come right in here and type in order by and then, ISBN, and that would do the sorting. But if you don't know SQL, which most people don't, you can go ahead and click the Query Builder button in the bottom right. And it kind of takes you into a little window that looks like Access. And you can go to your ISBN number and go to where it says Sort Order, or Sort Type actually, and click the drop down arrow and select Ascending. If you were going to have multiple sort fields, then you'd have to pick the sort order. But we only have one sort field, so we don't really need to bother with sort order. But we need to say we want to sort our ISBN numbers in ascending order. Notice that it generated the SQL for us, order by ISBN. And when we click OK, we'll see that that line of SQL got added to our table adapter. So we're going to go ahead and hit Finish. We can now close the schema window. And when we rerun our project, now we should see that everything is sorted in order by ISBN. So you're going to be doing that for the title. And again, always remember, do not leave Form 1 in your blue title bar. You should always have a descriptive title up in there, R&R Books, data inquiry, or whatever you want to say, R&R Books, details view, grid view. So that's it for now. Go ahead and do Chapter 10 hands-on as well as these projects and submit those by Friday. And we're getting near the end of the semester. Hope everything's going well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.